Welcome everyone to this fourth webinar in the WFAD and Colton Hall's Consulting LCC Prevention Series on the topic of gender-based violence approaches. My name is Regina Mattsson and I represent WFAD, a multilateral community of NGOs and individuals. With over 330 member organizations in 60 countries, we join hands in strengthening prevention, increasing access to treatments, and promoting recovery. As of our 2020 annual Congress, we decided that for the next 10 years ahead, we will focus particularly on two key issues, and these are the needs and the rights of children and women in our fields. And this has also been visible throughout this prevention series. We have gone through three main aspects of the prevention field so far, starting in the foundations of prevention science during our first webinar, going then to research and policy of prevention in our second one, and the third one, practitioners of prevention, where we were joined by NGOs from civil society, sharing their expertise with a particular focus on children. And now we're venturing into two key topics, gender-based violence and marijuana prevention. And today we're looking at gender-based violence prevention. And why is this? Well, gender-based violence in general, and violence against women in particular, is a global health issue and oftentimes happens in connection to problematic alcohol and/or drug use. We have, for instance, seen an increase in instances of gender-based violence during the times of the pandemic, and know that many of our members and colleagues around the globe need gender-based violence in their daily work, and also highlight this as a key issue within their activities. And as we're itching closer to Orange Day on the 25th of November, which is the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women, it is particularly important to highlight this global issue. Before presenting our speakers, I will go through the agenda for today. To start us off and leading us into the topic at hand, we have a keynote speaker who will speak for about 35 to 40 minutes, after which we will invite our panel to add with their expertise on the topic for about 8 to 10 minutes each, providing enough space and room for questions and answers from our audience. We want this to be as interactive as possible, so we welcome you to use the chat box to introduce yourselves and to share your own expertise there throughout the session. The Q&A box will be open as well for your questions. With us today, we have four incredible speakers working within different world regions and addressing gender-based violence in various ways, all of whom I'll introduce now before we would begin with the program. Our keynote speaker, Anna Nabilia, is the Deputy Director at Uganda Youth Development Link and oversees all programs and partnerships related to trafficking in persons and safe migration, sexual exploitation and abuse of children and youth, and gender-based violence against girls and young women. Anna is a Vital Voices Global Women Leader under the Hilton Worldwide Global Freedom Exchange Program from 2014, committed to fighting child sex trafficking, and is a U.S. State Department Fellow under the Community Solutions Program, contributing to the Gender and Women Development thematic area. Anna has 17 years of experience in mobilizing resources, designing and coordinating projects that address socioeconomic and socio-behavioral rehabilitation and reintegration of children and young people in the ages between 10 and 25 that have been affected by sexual exploitation and abuse, with a specific focus on child trafficking, commercial sexual exploitation of children, sexual reproductive health and rights, economic empowerment, and online child sexual exploitation and abuse. After our keynote, we will welcome our second speaker and our first panelist, Sara Esmezadeh from ADNA. Sara has a background in sociology, both with her BA and MA, and is currently a PhD student of sociology. Her research interests lie in public policy, and her work experience includes working on the ground with drug prevention, treatment, and harm reduction programs for women and youth. Sara has experience with drug demand reduction NGOs in Iran for over 10 years. And for most of the years of her work, she has been engaged in managing harm reduction and drug prevention programs among Afghan refugees in Iran, as well as developing and piloting gender-responsive programs in prevention, harm reduction, and treatment. Sara also leads a joint project between ADNA and WFAD, among other partners, a project that focuses on targeting prevention, early detection, and intervention to prevent drug dependence among female members of families with substance use problems, a project which specifically addresses addresses issues of gender-based violence. Our third speaker and panelist is Sigrid Björnsdottir. Sigrid is a clinical psychologist and project manager for Barnaheil, which is Save the Children in Iceland. Sigrid is a project manager and oversees national projects for the prevention of sexual abuse against children. She co-founded the NGO organization Straight Forward in 2004 for the prevention of sexual abuse. The organization later merged with Save the Children in 2019. Sigrid provides counseling and educates adults of various institutions and provides supports to families and relatives of children who are victims of sexual violence. Additionally, she offers counseling on the effects of adverse childhood experiences as a guest lecturer at the University of Akureyri and at the University of Iceland. Sigrid's specialization consists of counseling, training, and education in the prevention of sexual violence in childhood and the consequences thereof. Furthermore, she provides institutions, sports clubs, and other associations with recommendations regarding the implementation of procedures and ethics concerning the protection of children against violence. Among many further expertise and experience, Sigrid also has collaborated in violence prevention measures with other nations and has trained people in preventive methods in the Nordic countries and elsewhere in Europe. Last but certainly not least, we will welcome Nikishka Ibe, who is the founder of Impact Her World Foundation in Nigeria, an organization committed to promoting the well-being of women and girls, especially in the areas of education, women economic empowerment, sexual reproductive health and rights, and gender-based violence issues. Nikishka is also the brain behind the Girls Period Kit, her innovative solution to period poverty among young girls in rural and underserved communities. Nikishka is currently a research and relationship manager at Town Talk Solution, directly working on Project SAFE, a project that is using artificial intelligence in mitigating gender-based violence. Beyond working in the field to better the lives of women and girls, Nikishka is equally a researcher and has worked on issues like intimate partner violence, drug and substance abuse among pregnant women, and her research also covers areas such as the environment and climate change with a major focus on water. So without further ado, I think I will welcome now our keynote speaker, Anna Nabulia, who will guide us into the topic before we welcome our great panel. Anna, we thank you so much for being here with us today, and the floor is yours.
Deprivation on liberty of people, but we are also looking at acts that can be done to someone against their will as a result of either the gender norms or unequal power relations. And then we are also saying that gender-based violence often involves crimes of power and intended to degrade or humiliate and subjugate victims to different types of harm. So when we look at the prevalence of gender-based violence, we are seeing World Health Organization estimating 1 in 3 women worldwide who experience physical or sexual violence in their lifetime. But when we come down to Africa, we are estimating over 44% of women who are aged within the ages of 15 to 49 that have experienced intimate partner violence. But then we are also seeing that Eastern Africa, which is the Horn of Africa, has the highest prevalence within the region in regards to gender-based violence. Now, when we come back to Uganda, based on the police reports that have been recorded just January to 2020 last year, we see there's a high increase in gender-based violence. If you can see right there, they registered 16,000 cases, 16,242 cases of sexual gender-based violence just reported from January to June 2020. And this meant that every month they were registering approximately 2,000 cases of sexual gender-based violence. But what is worrying is that even with all the 16,000 cases that were registered, we only had around 523 cases that were taken to court. And out of these cases that were taken to court, we only had 96 of these cases that secured convictions, and then 13 cases were dismissed, and only 414 cases were still pending. while the others were still under investigations by police. So it seems that on the side of Uganda, we haven't done much in terms of addressing sexual gender-based violence, especially when it comes to legal aid and prosecution. But then we also note that domestic violence has mainly been as a result of disputes among families, family property, failure for the family to provide for their family members, but we're also seeing drugs and alcohol also contributing highly to the domestic violence cases that were reported to police last year. Now, when I come into the overall Ugandan country context, the Ministry of Health in Uganda has revealed that we have 25% of Ugandan teenagers that become pregnant by the age of 19, which is most likely as a result of sexual gender-based violence, like I'll share with you later, based on the work that we are doing. But it also shows that Uganda has the highest rate of teenage pregnancies in the sub-Saharan Africa, which has registered over 25 pregnancies among teenagers. That is as of the Uganda population census. And then we are also seeing quite a number of increases in teenage girls who are being married off before the age of 18. And this is in the rural areas where you see over 128 school-going girls who have been married off in Chegegwa, Rakai, Kamira sub-counties, and also in Ruwero. Now, when we come into the UDEL statistics, we reached over 580 young people this year from January to June 2021. And from the 580 young people, we had 29% of these who had children already. And of course, when we further analyze the data that we collected, we realized that in every 10 girls, 3 of them were teenage mothers. And this was as a result of either being into transactional sex or sexual gender-based violence within the homes. And then we also realized that the age of first sexual consent or involvement was age 15. And this actually helped us understand that we need to start our prevention interventions for gender-based violence before the girls or young women turn 15. And then we've, of course, had a lot of attempted terminations of pregnancy as a result of gender-based violence. We are looking at 47% of the 580 who tried to terminate the pregnancy. Now, in 2020, last year, when we looked at gender-based violence cases that were received within our UDEL safe spaces in 7 districts, we got an overwhelming number, which was 8,349 right there. But of course, look at the different types of GBV, forms of GBV that were happening to them. Of course, emotional and physical were taking the higher rate there. And of course, all of these girls were girls who had reported sexual abuse, but also involvement in transactional sex. And of course, when we try to analyze this data to tease out how many of these had children before the age of 10, the curve was kind of skewing around the ages of 16, 18. So you see even after 10, there are some that are already having children within the ages of 10 and 15. And of course, it skyrockets when it comes to those that are 19 to 24 years. So this tells us a lot on what interventions we need to undertake and where we need to start the interventions and what is happening within our safe spaces. Now, if I can take you a little bit into COVID-19 and gender-based violence, there's a YouTube video there. I don't know if you will be able to watch it, but I know Regina will help share this presentation with everyone. You can look at it in your free time. However, when we look at the COVID-19 situation and gender-based violence, we are seeing that the UN is warning of a shadow pandemic of an increased gender-based violence cases due to the lockdowns and also the stay-home orders that have been issued by different governments. And of course, this is skyrocketing as a result of alcohol and drugs use as well. And then also the East African community is reporting 48% rise in GBV cases that they have recorded in just a short time. But then we are also seeing that the International Labour Organization is estimating that up to 25 million people will lose their jobs worldwide. And this means that there will be an increase, implies there will be an increase in gender-based violence cases due to financial strains on families, and also due to the economic strain in the economies. But also that means that there will be a rise in domestic partner violence, which will be basically exacerbated by the stay-home orders that were issued within the lockdown. But of course, this is also the fact that there are not enough services, or there are limited restrictions on movements for people to be able to get services in terms of gender-based violence, may also increase on the cases that are being recorded, and those that are even silent are not recorded at all. So the fact that we cannot access services, it means that the reporting will be low, but also it means that there will be a lot of people silent there that are suffering with issues of gender-based violence in the homes due to the restrictions in movements, but also the fact that many of the countries are now focusing on COVID-19 and are not giving particular attention to other interventions or other issues that are happening underlying there. We're also seeing an increase in human trafficking as a result of gender-based violence, but also human trafficking contributing to gender-based violence. And like you can see there, the UNODC report for 2021 is highlighting 65% of victims of trafficking in persons globally, which are mainly women and girls. But of course, we're also seeing that the purpose for sexual exploitation is mainly, the purpose for their being trafficking is mainly for sexual exploitation. And of course, there's a large number of women and girls, but not leaving out the men as well, and the young boys who are also being affected. And here they share with you the forms of exploitation that have been detected among the trafficked victims that were received under UNODC in 2021. Of course, we do have some regional and international legal frameworks that have been put in place to support any interventions or address gender-based violence within the region and also within the international community. The CEDAW, which was adopted by the UN General Assembly in 1979 in Somalia and Sudan, is there, but it's not yet ratified. So we need to ratify to it, and we need to have more countries also come in and ratify to the CEDAW, to the Convention of the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. In the region, we have the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, which was adopted in July 2023, although we still have quite a number of countries within the Better Migration Management Program that haven't ratified to it. So we also need to take some action there and see that most of us ratify to this, because then it will show our commitment to fighting gender-based violence. And there is the Beijing Declaration and also the United Nations Convention Against Transnational Organized Crime, which also commits different states to address issues of gender-based violence. Now, when we look at gender-based violence, we see quite a number of forms. Some of these are physical, where you see quite a number of actual or attempted assaults, where you also get issues of deprivation of liberty, where you see murder, feminicide, but also female genital mutilation. And then we also see another form in terms of sexual, where we have forms like rape, sexual assault, survival sex, and sexual exploitation, intimidation, and also forced prosecution. And then there's also psychological forms of gender-based violence, which include coercion, defamation, verbal insults, and harassment. And the other form is socioeconomic, which looks at property damage, restriction of access to financial resources or education, and also the labor market, but also denial of opportunities on the basis of gender. Now, I highlighted a bit of female genital mutilation because this is one of the forms that is largely seen within Africa, especially in West, East, and Northeast Africa. where we are seeing 3 million girls that have been estimated to be at risk of FGM annually. And it's a practice that is basically done by partial or total removal of the external female genitalia, but also creating other harm. And we're saying this is not a health benefit, but it's basically a social norm, or it's a social norm that has been ascribed by certain tribal groups to create more, that causes more physical and psychological harm to women. Now, I'll take you to a little bit of fun time now, which is a quiz time. I'll request the participants to just go into your chat box and try and answer these few questions. It's just for us to get to gauge ourselves and to know where we are in terms of understanding GBV. One of the questions that I will ask, question number 1 would be, is GBV regarded as a private matter? Please, in the chat box, type whether it's true or false. Whether you think, if you think it's a private matter, type true. Whether you think it's a false matter, type false in the chat box. Just go into the chat box quickly. I will use around 1 or 2 minutes. Okay, I can see a lot of false. I can see true, false, true. Does anyone who has answered false want to say something right now? Come in and explain why you have put false. Should GBV be regarded as a private matter?
Excuse me, if participants would like to speak, raise your virtual hand and we can unmute you. So in the event that somebody wants to answer live. I see Catherine is raising your hand. I believe, Catherine, you said true. So perhaps we can ask Catherine to answer to that question. Is that all right, Anna?
Yes, that's all right, Regina. Please, Catherine.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, Catherine.
Hello.
Why do you think GBV should be a private matter?
Because it has to be the person herself to decide whether to undergo it or not. By making it public, it means that everybody has to consent into the act. But once it's private, then it is the person to decide whether to undergo or not.
Thank you, Catherine. Can we have maybe one participant that said false? GBV should be regarded as a private matter or should not be regarded as a private matter?
We have 2 people raising their hands. I will ask Mariam to speak first and then Lena.
Okay, so Mariam, please. Why do you think it's false, Mariam?
Mariam, I think you need to unmute. Up now.
It's false because it's something that everybody has to be involved with. If we make it a private matter, it stays private. But with it coming public, people will be sensitized and they will know the implications of it.
Thank you, Mariam. Lena, why do you think it's false?
I think it's, can you hear me?
Yes,
okay.
Yes, Lena, we can hear.
Sorry, okay. I think it's false because it's almost all, I guess I could say always forced with violence, and in ages where girls, especially young girls, they can't defend themselves, and this is, it's violating, it's a violence and very bad, causing lifelong consequences.
Yes, thank you, Lena. And I think the answer there is false. It shouldn't be regarded as a private matter because it's a deprivation on human rights. And if we regard it as a private matter, it means that the people that have been affected by it will not receive the services that they require, but also it means that people will go silent and nothing will be done about a GBV, which is quite escalating these days. So thank you everyone who said it shouldn't be a private matter. I know even those that say true, it should be a private matter. You have your own, you may have your own concerns, but I think in this regard, it shouldn't be a private matter. And then the other question that I would want for you to go into the chat box and write whether it's true or false would be only women can become victims of GBV. Is this true or false? Is it only women that become victims of gender-based violence? Or do we have males as well? Is this true or false? Okay, I think we have quite a number of false there, and that's right. When we look at gender-based violence, it's not only women that are victims, but we also see quite a number of males that fall victim to gender-based violence. Just for us maybe to continue, due to the interest of time, we'll have more discussions during the panel discussions. When we look at the perpetrators of gender-based violence, we usually see people in positions of power or with control over others that are mainly perpetrators. But we also know that most of the perpetrators of gender-based violence are also known to victims. And then that most of the perpetrators are men. However, we've also committed acts of gender-based violence against fellow men, but also, fellow women, but also against men. Now, when we look at the UDEL data, the categorization of perpetrators that we registered amongst the young people that we saw were mainly the border cyclists. We saw some teachers there. There were relatives. I think the biggest number was relatives. But we also, interesting in the village, in the rural areas, we're also seeing cattle herdsmen who would come with trucks every weekend to sell off cattle. These were also part of the people that were mentioned by the girls. And then we also saw a lot of the chapati sellers. We have quite a number of Rolex makers within different parts of the city, but also in rural areas. And then we also saw quite a number of other categories of perpetrators that were older men. Now, when we talk about gender-based violence, which is mainly against women and girls, we are looking at that encompasses a complex of gender roles and expectations, but also we see quite a number of male entitlements, especially here in Africa. But I know it's also in Europe where you see quite a lot of male entitlements and also sexual objectification. But we're also seeing quite a number of social indicators that reflect that there is access to, their access to various resources like education, health, labor can be restricted. And then we are also seeing that women and girls are also at a disadvantage, especially from birth. You know, these days we also have the gender reveal parties that are aimed at knowing whether it's a girl or boy that one is going to have. And of course, if it is a girl, there are colors that are put on the cakes and on the decorations just to reveal that it's a girl. And of course, the parents start planning things in different color coordinations, which sometimes may create a gender-based violence across or may kickstart the life cycle of gender-based violence against women and girls. But then we are also seeing that when we talk about gender-based violence against women and girls, we're seeing that most of the cases where perpetrators of the violence are men from within the family. There's greater pressure for the women to maintain silence, especially when it's within the family. But we're also seeing that where it's women and girls, we see a lot of the communities wanting to treat this as a private matter. And of course, they don't want anyone to speak about issues of domestic violence or gender-based violence to the prosecution, or they don't want to see the people they know being punished. And of course, it's a violation to human rights, and of course, may impair a lot of fundamental freedoms for women and girls. But also when we talk about gender-based violence against men or boys, we are seeing that there is an added cultural and societal stigma that is faced by the male victims, where we have stricter gender norms, like, you have to be a man, you don't have to talk about, these things that can shame you as a man, you have to stay strong, you don't cry around issues like these ones that may be violating you as a man, be a man. We're seeing that a lot within the African culture, but I know it's also in Western countries where it also happens. But also we've seen that for the men and boys, there's a fear of being perceived as being a homosexual. So in many countries, they will just keep quiet and they will not report cases of gender-based violence against them. And it's also very difficult for male survivors to admit or to disclose that they are survivors. They instead prefer to keep quiet, and of course, it will be very difficult for them to get help. But also sometimes due to the lack of awareness, and also maybe own biases, it may be difficult for them to get the support they need, but also the service providers may be biased to provide the support they need for especially the boys and the males, or may not even know how to handle men and boys, since largely most of the reports, the cases that service providers handle are mainly for women and girls. And then we are also seeing that there is an overlook in terms of awareness, service provision, and legal protection for men and boys in terms of gender-based violence. Many human rights instruments are gender-specific, use gender-specific language when referring to gender-based violence. You'll see that many of them tend to refer to women and girls, and of course, boys and men are left out. But we are also seeing that there's some penal codes, some national penal codes that define rape as specifically to women. And of course, this hinders reporting on the side of boys and men, but also hinders interventions for boys and men, because then it's seen as a women's issue. We also see quite a number of gender-based violence against men and boys in conflict settings, especially where you see men being targeted for killings of killings of men, where men and boys are forced to kill for potential enemies in fights, but also conducting acts of rape to loved ones, but also to other females that they see. And then, of course, there's forced recruitment and conscription within different conflict settings. We've also seen gender-based violence among people with disabilities. However, we are saying that we have quite limited data around gender-based violence and people living with disabilities. But of course, it's known that there's a higher level of gender-based violence amongst this particular group of vulnerable people. And this is mainly more especially for those that have the mental disabilities that may be at risk. And of course, we do see quite a number of people living with disabilities being vulnerable to trafficking in persons for either sexual purposes or removal of organs. We've registered quite a number of cases with albinism, where people are forced to kill anyone with albinism to get wealth, especially in the African setting. And of course, there are quite a number of structural factors that put people living with disabilities, make them vulnerable to gender-based violence. Of course, the harmful gender norms and stereotypes. I just talked about the albinism and how they're forced, they are killed for wealth. We see things like social context of disability. We are also seeing barriers to access of services, which may hinder their access to services, but also increase their vulnerability to abuse and the lack of power and resources for the fact that they are people living with disabilities. There are quite a number of enabling factors for gender-based violence. Some of these are societal, where you will see a lot of economic inequalities and dependency. Some of these are relationship, where you see quite a number of poor parenting practices, violent parental conflict, low economic, social and economic household status, and also friends that engage in violence. But some of these enabling factors are individual, where you see psychological and personality disorders, and also where one is abusing alcohol and other substances. They may fall prey to gender-based violence because of this, or if they are in a situation where there is a lot of alcohol and substance use, they are most likely going to fall victims to gender-based violence. So there are quite a number of consequences when it comes to gender-based violence. Some of these are physical, some of these are reproductive, others are socioeconomic, like you see right there. And of course, we see quite a number of those under emotional and psychological factors, like the post-traumatic stress disorder, depression, anxiety, self-blame, but also suicide coming in. Now, we have main principles for handling gender-based violence survivors. When we are service providers, of course, we have to include issues of respect for the survivors. And of course, with respect for the survivors, we are also looking at their best interests, not just prescribing our own interventions, decisions, or ideas or choices on them, but ensuring that we are also looking at their best interests, or putting in mind their best interests. What is it that they want? What is it that they would want to see before we undertake any kind of support or intervention with them? We have to ensure confidentiality. This is one of the international principles of working with survivors of gender-based violence. But what is most important is the issue of safety and security for both the survivor, but also for the service provider who is providing services. Sometimes it takes for you as a survivor or as a service provider to be aware of what is happening around you, being alert, not mentioning locations, or finding safe houses or safe spaces where the survivors can be kept, but also ensuring that the information is not left everywhere for everyone to see. Now, when we look at the help that is needed by service providers, of course, there's quite a wide range of services. I just put this here for you to keep in mind that there are quite a number of needs, but also issues that you can do to support a survivor of sexual gender-based violence. One of the health needs would be the post-exposure prophylaxis, especially as which should be given within 72 hours of an incident that may have occurred on GBV, if it's a rape case or if it's a sexual exploitation issue. But it crosses over to the legal support and justice support that you may give survivors of GBV. This is what we have done at UDEL. We do HIV, GBV, alcohol screening for all the young people that come into our safe spaces. And we base our referrals on the screening that has been done with each survivor that walks into, or each victim that walks into. We also try to get them to access social protection services through resilience building and positive assets building sessions like Stepping Stones and Sinovuyo. We also work with different communities and support them to be aware of different aspects of gender-based violence, but also come out and talk about gender-based violence. and not just keep it as a hidden practice. We partner quite a lot with the local leadership. We do risk management and mitigation awareness, and we've also capitalized on the COVID-19 surveillance teams, since these ones have free movement and free access to different communities. Parts of the communities, it's easier for them to pass on messages on GBV in their communities without restrictions during the lockdowns, but also during the stay-home orders. We have put up quite a number of information materials, and also where they can get services in terms of COVID, but also gender-based violence, victims that have been affected by gender-based violence. We've looked at food and nutrition, especially during the COVID lockdown, which was one of the key elements that we saw within our data that was causing gender-based violence within the homes. And of course, economic strengthening to support income protection. That's our website if you want to get more information, and also our social media pages are right there for you. And I've also added more resources for you right there if you need to read more about gender-based violence. Thank you very much for listening. I want to turn the chair back to Regina. Thank you, Regina, for hosting me. Thank you, everyone, for listening to me.
Thank you, Anna, for this brilliant keynote. It's amazing how you both portray the larger issue of gender-based violence and connect it to your local and regional levels as well, which is absolutely brilliant. Thank you for being here. I see we have some questions for you in the chat, but I would like to keep them until after we've had our panelists join us as well. So thank you again, Anna. And we will go over to our panel, and each of our panelists will have a few minutes to add on to your expertise, Anna, based on their own context and their own experience that they have in the field. So first off, within our panel, I would like to welcome Sara Esmizadeh from ADNA to share as based on your experience. Sara, thank you for being here, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Regina, for your kind introduction, and thank you for hosting us today. Actually, I'm deeply impressed by all the incredible work and breadth of expertise I see here today. It's my honor to be here with you. Well, I'm really passionate about this topic, as you know, but I'm afraid I can't add much to what Anna presented. Violence against women, gender-based violence is the same old story worldwide across all the societies and countries. So I just would like to take the opportunity to briefly talk about my most recent experience of working with young women and girls in a project funded by European Commission in Iran, as you mentioned. First, I need to give a little background about our clients. In the project, we target young women and girls with the most humbling goal of only to some extent improving their quality of life in order to hopefully prevent future vulnerabilities. I regret to say that, I regret to say that our clients come from a family and community environment which is too untrained, too uneducated, too disadvantaged, and too deprived from normal and safe life that every bit of intervention can make a difference. More than 95% of our clients from the earliest stages of childhood have been subjected to a range of violence, from neglect to child abuse to rape, from forced and child marriage to early pregnancies. And as adults, most of them are suffering from intimate partners' violence. A significant number of them have suffered from such an extreme violent environment that, together with malnutrition and lack of health and hygiene education, it has caused permanent physical and mental damages to them. Keeping in mind that those that I'm talking about are living in the capital city, let alone the small towns and villages. As I said, clients have been brought up in such a deprived environment that I had to admit that we are working, for most of the clients, we are working on the most basic social and behavioral skills, and we are dealing with untreated trauma, suicidal thoughts, and repeated self-harm incidents. So although I was noticing a slight changes, but as the project manager, I was quite hopeless that we would achieve any presentable outcome and impact in terms of domestic violence. However, by the end of the first year, when the first evaluation results came out, to my disbelief, 74% of those clients, those who at their admission has reported being exposed to violence, they said that they are experiencing less violence than ever. You know, my first instinct was, no way, it can't be. There must be a systemic bias interfering with these results. Many of you working in this field may be used to getting this level of results in your societies, but in my context, where abusers and perpetrators feel so entitled, culture and law are protective to perpetrators, and victims, they are so used to it that they think of violence as a part of having a man in their life. This kind of results raise suspicion for people like me, at least. I was quite satisfied with other indicators. We had achieved good rates in reduction of recreational drug use, preventing suicides and self-harm, preventing school dropouts and running away from home, and even child marriage. But, domestic violence is a totally different story. It's very difficult to change. It's resistant to change. So I started digging into client files, case reports, spreadsheets. I reviewed every step of the evaluation process, looked everywhere to discover the bias. Well, you can imagine that moment of extreme joy when I finally was convinced it's actually real. There was no significant bias. We had made a real change, a real difference. To highlight the importance of these results for our context, I had to say that when it comes to gender-based violence, violence against women, and domestic violence, our hands are quite tied. We cannot work at the societal and community level. Only choice for us is focusing on individual level. And even at the individual level, we cannot directly address the violence. So what we did was very cautiously offering support and services to all of the family members, including the perpetrators, and conducting family interventions alongside with psychosocial support and therapy. Well, at this point, I still can't be sure if it's a permanent change of behavior or is just a short-term reaction to new learnings and new information, but I give all the credit to our comprehensive and inclusive approach towards the quality of life. We have tried to be a welcoming door from which the clients and their family can get all the services they need for violence, for health issues. We offer services for drug and mental disorders, family interventions, for child marriage, and forced school dropouts, pursuing their education, vocational training, linking to job opportunities and life skills. Well, longest story short, I know many of us who work in this field at some point lose faith and get used to failure. I did that. I was that person, but especially in countries like mine, in which pursuing violence cases is discouraged, is highly discouraged, and even punishable in some cases. I just wanted to share my team's experience and appreciate all their efforts. I'm witnessing on a daily basis against all of the obstacles, disappointing circumstances and frustrations. They refuse to get used to failure. They refuse to get used to the idea that it's a lost battle. I learned from them that every bit of effort can change a life of a domestic violence victim. That's it. Thank you for listening. I tried to keep it short, Regina.
No, thank you for that. And also thank you for sharing your incredible results. I mean, I think you really, what's it called, pinned the nail there on something when it comes to gender-based violence, and especially working within our field. It is important not to be discouraged and keep working and keep focusing
Thank you.
and lifting up one another, and to going from having to choose a certain level of intervention and having these incredible results is just absolutely fantastic. So I thank you so much for sharing, and I'm sure we'll have a lot of questions for you, which we'll save for the end of the session as well, to hear more about how you managed to do this. I mean, we're all incredibly impressed.
Thank you for the
and very,
opportunity.
I see Carlton clapping as well, and you can see the chat for yourself as well. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
And in the interest of time, I will just save all of the questions for later, and then the questions that are specific to our speakers, we'll have them answer them as well, so to ensure that all your questions are answered. But thank you again, Sarah, for being here. And now to move from one region to another, and a region a little bit more closer to where I'm situated, I have the honor to introduce Sigrid Björnsdottir from Save the Children in Iceland to share your expertise. Thank you as well for being here, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. Hello, everyone, and thank you so much, Regina, for the introduction. And it's been wonderful to listen to the passionate presentations from both Anna and Sarah. Thank you so much. My fire starts bubbling when I'm listening to you. I'm really honored to be part of this. Our collective and important responsibility in recognizing, learning, and teaching informative and adaptive preventative measures for women and children is paramount. On a regular basis, we are faced with the challenges we address out of necessity, to survive, to create a better existence, and to change our lives in the short term and the long term range. Our learning are often based on our experiences, and we realize their importance when we apply the knowledge in a beneficial way. Creating, improving living conditions for humanity is our collective responsibility. Among our learning is how we deal with natural challenges which we are facing, like in Iceland now, earthquakes, volcanic eruptions. All over the world is the tidal waves, extreme weathers, and droughts. We gather our learnings and draw from the knowledge necessary to inform, advise, teach, and adopt to a better world and improve existence for humanity. And we also learn from the improvements and applicability in health conditions, such as widespread inoculations, the use of effective medicine when dealing with diseases, and with change in our daily routine. Examples of this are how we deal with the spread of COVID-19, and how we can deal with global malnutrition issues, and how we can abolish health-threatening work conditions. We learn, we inform, we teach, and we adopt. As a human beings living in a challenging environment, we must learn, inform, teach, and adopt our knowledge, both in short and long term. Applying our collective wisdom in dealing with challenges is always of prime importance for us to enjoy a better world for all. Sexual violence towards women and children is particularly a fact, and we know this. So most importantly, we can be eradicated by learning, informing, teaching, and applying successful methods. This is a fact we all recognize and know. So let's create a significantly better existence for thousands of women and children by informing, teaching, and adopting preventative measures in eradicating sexual violence. We have the experience and knowledge necessary to do this, but it's imperative that we use the proven methods successfully by adopting long-term preventative measures within the society we live in. And this is our collective responsibility for all. Gender-based violence approaches, as we have heard, are violations of human rights for all genders. The impact of abuse is far greater than the immediate visible effect. Abuse are associated with developmental delays, learning disorder, problem-forming relationship, aggressive behavior, and depression. NGOs like ours have been pushing for change in a small scale until Me Too movements all over the world forced us to wake up and see the problem on a larger scale. 20 years ago, we did not speak about gender-based violence as a problem for society as a whole. We did not understand the relationship of childhood abuse on many of the leading causes of death in adults. Survivors are at greater risk of problems later in life, such as low academic achievement, drug use, teen pregnancy, and criminal behavior. The change has moved through people, women and men, but women, that speak up, tell stories, are believed, get support, and change happens. I'm one of them. I spoke up, I got help, and I started to help others. And now I see the impact of me standing up, supporting more people to do better in ending gender violence. Main focus on prevention is to educate adults to set up preventive strategies and framework around children who should not have to protect themselves from abuse. With focusing also on educating children and teenagers, we see more children speaking up and getting help sooner in life. Of these two things, educating adults and educating children, and I'm not quite sure if I should say happy or sad, but I am quite happy to say that educating kids and teenagers about setting boundaries, speaking up, and getting help when needed are giving us more results. But sadly, educating adults on strategies, prevention plans, and reporting is taking too long, or at least it's taking longer than I wished. And it looks to me that children that we have been focusing on for the last 15 years in Iceland, at least, those are the ones who are understanding better the importance of prevention of gender violence. These are the children are now part of the movement of preventing gender violence. They are demanding the changes faster than demanding the change faster than I believe the systems are ready for. I do have to say, though, in Iceland, the Minister of Social Affairs and Children have been able to move to do more changes for the system to do better, but we are still in the first steps of seeing the change happen with new government. So gender prevention, gender-based prevention approaches for women and children are important. And we can start with simply basic 5 steps. The first step, we need to know the facts and the risk, and Anna has been going through them as well as in Europe, we know the statistics, and in Iceland, it's 1 in every 3 girls and 1 in every 5 boys who've been sexually abused before their 18th birthday. And if we don't understand what sexual abuse is, we can't stop it. Step 2, stay alert and reduce the risk factors. We must create a safe environment, and that can help reduce the risk of sexual abuse. Step 3, educate children. And like I said, it's working. Talk openly about boundaries, body, and communications. That's what helps the most. Step 4, listen, believe, and support children. People's attitudes and reactions can affect when or if a child discloses about sexual abuse. Step 5, react responsibly. It is our responsibility to respond appropriately to suspicions and knowledge about sexual abuse. So the knowledge is power. So we need to do more in educating and raising awareness about gender-based violence. We do that with support groups, for example, like Bellanet Group, helping also survivors to speak up. We need to support change in the system, municipalities, schools, and talk to politicians. We need to improve access on education for women and children of all genders about gender violence. And we need to prioritize trauma-informed training. And also we need to support changes in the system, justice system, social service, police, and healthcare. And I could go on and on, but for this, my short presentation, I really acknowledge that we are doing the right things to do. I would wish we would be able to reach better to grown-ups and adults, but we have to continue doing what's working. So we are also talking to the teenagers and educating children as well. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Sigrid, and amazing work in managing not only to highlight the situation that you face in Iceland and in the region, but also giving us these very, effective approaches and how we can prevent abuse among children. And I think these 5 steps can be used as well, in other situations, are very good, and I would see that they're possible to contextualize into other areas as well. So thank you for that, and for highlighting the collectivism that we need, and the the engagement and the involvement of children, because we often hear that children are our future, but they are also our now, and they are so able and capable of changing, turning the ship around, so to speak. So we need to work together with everyone to get this to to see a long-term change. So thank you so much. And I'm sure that there will be a lot of questions for you also. And I can't wait for the question and answer section of this, because I'm sure we'll have very interesting conversations. So thank you again for being here. And I will now guide us to our fantastic colleague Nikishka from Impact Her World Foundation to present as well. Thank you for being here with us today. And the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
We hear you perfectly.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much, Regina. This is a wonderful presentation from Anna to Sarah to Sig. It's just been inspiring all the way. And I'm really, it's an honor to be here to speak on this very, very important issue of gender-based violence, because for me, I see it as a pandemic more than the COVID pandemic, because I always say that until we see GBV as a pandemic, or till we are work on GBV until the international community comes together, everybody comes together to work on issues of GBV the way we work on the issue of COVID-19. I think women and girls will be safe, boys and men will be safe. And that is why in our work at Impact Her World Foundation, we always work towards promoting the interest and well-being of women, be it via sexual and reproductive health, trainings and issues, and gender-based violence, education, and the rest of it. But one thing strikes me each time that we are on the field working, it's the vulnerability of young girls. Our focus mostly is on teenage girls for now, and the vulnerability of young girls is one of the things that has made me, I might not be able to be Superman. I wish I am. I have superpowers to change things, by just a blink of an eye, but it's something that has really, really hurt me. One of the cases that we've dealt with, or one of the cases that we've come in contact with, is a situation where we went for a program in a school, as we normally do. We go for training in schools and public schools. And then on entering the school, it was a bit chaotic. We didn't even know what was going on. And then asking questions, and the academic principal called me by the side and said that there is a little problem, that one of their students has just decided to drop out of school for a certain reason. So when I dig deep, she said that she was a victim of GBV. Now, the story is that the principal of the school had a gatekeeper that he trusted so well, and this gatekeeper is doing so well that he said, according to the principal, "You're such a good man. I'm going to give you a place in the school so that to make your work easier for you." And for that, the principal gave the gatekeeper a house. And now, on the other hand, is a very young girl, beautiful 17-year-old girl, very intelligent, a scholarship candidate, doing very well in her education, and who eventually started dropping in her educational performance. She wasn't doing well as she used to, and teachers are beginning to be worried, and they called her to ask her questions. She doesn't talk. She almost like numb anytime she's in class. And so at some point, the teacher was threatening her that if she doesn't say, because for some of them, they felt the girl, maybe she took in, because they have cases of teenage pregnancy in the school. She's not the first, not the second. They have cases like that. So she felt like maybe she's pregnant and she's going through first trimester, she's being this. So they have already had that in their head. And when they called her, they asked her questions. She said she's not pregnant. So eventually the teacher threatened her that if you don't speak up, I'm going to report you to the principal and you might be expelled from the school. And that was when the girl kind of said, you don't have to expel me from the school. I'm going to speak up. I'm going to tell you, but you have to promise me that you won't say anything. The teacher gave her consent that she won't say anything, but on one condition, that if it is something detrimental to her health, that she is going to speak up. So the girl agreed. So that is another point that we must put into consideration, the power of consent. Because for young girls and for people out there, most of the reasons why they don't speak up is the fact that they feel that there's this fear of stigmatization and the fear of intimidation, because they've already been intimidated by their perpetrators. That is how the perpetrators operate. And you can't force them to speak up until until they have that will to speak up, or they are motivated to speak up. So when she gave her story to the principal, to the teacher was very, very shocked that she immediately asked the girl to please let her speak with the principal. And she eventually agreed, and she went to the principal. And when they got to the principal, she said the story again. And what's the story? The story is that the principal didn't do bad by giving the gatekeeper a home in the school to make work easier for him. But the thing is that the girl in question is the daughter of the gatekeeper. And because the girl in question is a student of the school, the principal said it's harmless for a daughter to live with the father, and for the father and that is being even closer to the school. And looking at that, the girl started living with the father in the school, and they never saw it as something harmful until it became harmful. Why? Because the father started raping and harassing and sexually assaulting the daughter. And one is that he did her to believe that this is where the money that he used in taking care of the family comes from. So if she speaks up and he gets fired from his job, they will lose their economic stability at home. So the girl is trying to protect the family by dying inside. So this is the cases of so many young girls. And the major issue is that whether we like it or not, the perpetrators are not so far from us. Whether we like it or not, the perpetrators are people we will never believe are perpetrators. People that when they do some stuff to you, they will say, nobody will ever believe you, even if you talk. And that is why in Impact Award, we keep trying to work towards enabling young girls to be more confident in coming up and speaking up. Confidence is very important. Self-esteem is very important. Self-awareness is very important. These are prevention approaches that we must adopt. And teenage girls are women of tomorrow. If we don't get them as they are young now, they will grow up to be timid women who are disempowered, women who doesn't have a voice in the society. And that is why we continue working on these varieties of areas to ensure that young girls are speaking up against this issue. And when I talk about this issue, I am currently working on a project. I most times don't talk about problems. I always look at what are the solutions that could be done. And that is why working on a project with Town Talk, which is Project Safe, I saw an innovative means of actually helping women, and that is leveraging technology. Technology is one thing that has come to stay, whether we like it or not. Even if Facebook goes off tonight for 2 days, they will still come back. Even if there's power outage in Facebook for 1 week, they will still come back with that. That's what I believe. But technology has come to stay. And because of that, we need to leverage technology. And that is why this project is doing, Project Safe. And it's creating this report channel, this mechanism using artificial intelligence where people can actually access support without even being known or seen. And it also brings into, it also considered people who do not have smartphones. They can actually access this. They can actually access these services by just dialing a USSD code. So we can actually leverage technology, because one of the major issues why people don't speak up is because they don't feel safe. If I feel safe in an environment, I will feel motivated to talk. But if I don't feel, this is one major thing. And then making sure that the consent of these victims are always given. There is a question that was thrown out, whether should GBV be regarded as a private matter? And there's almost like one person said true and everybody said false. But I would say that that's an open-ended question. Why? For me, I believe that it's a private matter until the person speaks up. it's private until the person speaks up. Sometimes people suffer GBV without even you knowing about it, until you maybe come in contact or you feel or you hear the stories. That is when you know. So sometimes it's private on the person until the person speaks up. So we must focus on encouraging people, creating that space, giving them reasons why they should speak up, giving them reasons why they should actually address these issues. Because when they do, one, their life is at stake if they don't. Two, they have every right to do because of the presence of human rights. And three, it's the best thing to do for them and for their families and for their loved ones. So while we work towards all this, we must always put into consideration the fact that there are so many challenges facing these GBV cases. It's a complex issue, very complex. It's not just about the women, there are boys, there are men suffering from it. And we don't have to, it's not something that we should be. I always say I don't approach things emotionally. I try to be very objective about it. It's not something that we have to be. It's a very serious issue, a complex issue that we have to look at every single approach that could work. Leveraging technology, creating safe spaces, the media. I saw firsthand how the media can be a huge tool in creating change. And I saw it in COVID-19. If we can adopt the level of media stunt and publication that COVID-19 got for GBV, I think the GBV issue will be a case of tomorrow, a case of yesterday. Honestly, we have to look at these things. We don't just have to talk about. I pray and believe that whatever we are doing here is not just a recording. It should be something that transcends this particular environment to the lives of people for which we are here today. And that is why I thank WFAD for this particular opportunity. And I will say that the fight is still on and we are not backing down. No matter the failures, the challenges, we are not backing down and we'll continue to move forward to ensure that every woman, every girl, every child, every boy, man out there has a say and can speak up at the time that he wishes. Thank you very much, Regina, and I'm very happy to be here.
Thank you so much, Nikishka, and for highlighting the importance and the power of consent, and as well as the empowerment and self-esteem that is important, but also for highlighting the need to leverage technology. That's something that is very much in our time and something that we should be looking more into when offering preventive approaches, not only within gender-based violence, but also within the drug policy field. So thank you so much for being here. And now we're moving on to the question and answer section. And I know some of us are struggling a little bit with internet connectivity, but if you're able to, as the panelists, you're most welcome to put on your video again. Otherwise, you can do that when the question is directed to you, and make sure that you just chat to me or tell me if you'd like to answer the question. We'll start with addressing all of you individually from the beginning, because we did get one question for each of you personally, and then we'll move on to a larger question. Hopefully we'll have enough time. So I thought we could start with a question for Anna. If you're here, Anna, the question is, what resources were needed that you wished that you had access to in order to reach girls and women at risk of gender-based violence during the pandemic lockdown?
And thank you, Regina. And I think one of the most important resources that we missed is the access to a reporting platform where cases of gender-based violence could be reported due to the restrictions in movement and the fact that we do not have closer units of reporting gender-based violence within our communities. So it was very difficult for people to report cases of gender-based violence because they couldn't walk to a nearby police, or they couldn't visit a nearby reception center or a rehabilitation center. And then, of course, we also needed quite a number of medical care services, and yet most of the hospitals were now working, most of the health workers had been tuned to go into COVID-19 interventions. And of course, there's quite a lot of panic that if you walked into a health center, you would get COVID-19. So people were fearing to even go near health centers for the health services or the needs that were needed in there. And of course, we also needed quite a number of mental health care support, and of course, support towards financial and economic empowerment of families, because this is where the biggest problems were coming from. And we're also looking at issues of alcohol and drug abuse prevention within families, because with the financial strain that occurred within the different families, the husbands were going out and drinking, the mothers were also, we got a case in Kayunga where the mother was also drinking, and they'll just come home and beat their children. There was no food, they'll just beat their children and ask them why they didn't put food, and yet they didn't leave the money behind for them to be able to cater for the food needs within the family. So I think that economic empowerment, in cases where we were able to give cash transfers, I think we mitigated a bit, but also the fact that people didn't know where to go to get services, or even to report, or even who to talk to. So they stayed with that depression within them. We had quite a lot of suicide attempts within the different families, and all these mental health needs that couldn't be supported due to the fact that most of the NGOs were on lockdown and were not part of the essential services in the first lockdown. In the second lockdown, at least the NGOs were a little bit lightened. We would move a bit, but not all of them. And of course, the rehabilitation centers were closed, given as a mitigation for COVID-19. So it was difficult for you to even find a safe place to keep a survivor or to refer a survivor to. So thank you. I think that could be one of the key issues that came out for me. Back to you, Regina.
Thank you, Anna. Is there anyone else from the panel who would like to answer the same question? I know from the experience of Sweden that there was a similar situation here in terms of the problematic aspect of not being able to see, for instance, school children who you could otherwise meet during the day. You could see if they were being affected by some sort of violence or neglect at home. When staying at home, this was much harder to notice. And while working from home, even though in Sweden, for instance, we didn't have full lockdown, it wasn't possible for women who were being subjected to domestic violence to go out and seek help. So we had the similar experience here as well. So thank you, Anna, for highlighting this. I'll turn over to Sarah. We have a question for you. And the question leads, what measures do you consider necessary to be able to reach out with important efforts with the prevention of gender-based violence to the part of the population that is undereducated, unaware, or disadvantaged?
Okay, thank you, Regina. Do you hear me? Yes, okay. Regarding this question, I have to say that the most crucial steps in my context is providing an absolutely safe space, because speaking openly, it's not common in my society, and actually it can have serious consequences for those who speak openly about the violence, especially in the most disadvantaged population. And we cannot accuse perpetrators. We cannot even form support group for those who are experiencing violence, because we can easily lose the clients. So we prefer to be more cautious, and so life skill trainings is very crucial in our work, and providing mental health services for all family members, and providing parenting training and support. It's very important, as I experienced it. And family intervention conducted by peers. It has proved very beneficial for our clients. And at the end, economic empowerment. It can change power relationships, and it can help women. They can get control of their lives. That's it.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you so much. I mean, it's always so interesting with discussing these issues, because like I think one of you said that this issue is something that is global, and we know this. Sigrid mentioned 1 in 3 people on Iceland, and globally it's 1 in 3 people in general, but that differs from place to place. But these instances are often similar, and the ways out are often similar as well. So this collectivism that we've been discussing throughout today is very important here in order to get to the root of the problem and make sustainable change. And speaking of collectivism, we have a question for you, Sigrun. The question is here regarding children. So the question is, what do the children say that they especially want the adult world to get better at in order to give them a healthier and more risk-free upbringing and society?
Thank you. Very good question. Basically, kids, children, and I think we can all relate to that. Basically, they want to be listened to. They desperate for, kids are not small grown-ups. These are kids and teenagers, and they are desperate for information, understanding, and be listened to. Most kids who have been sexually abused have tried to reach out to someone, and research say from 7 to 9 times before someone listens or believes that child. So they are trying to give us information about something that is happening to them, something that is bothering them, and they are desperate to who is going to listen to me, who is going to reach out to me and support me in getting the help that I need. And also they really are eager to get educated. Healthy sexuality, it's so important that adults, we need to, sip up and we need to just do this education. We need to be more interactive with children and teenagers at their level and be interactive and getting their correct and good information about healthy sexuality and, being interactive with other teens and with other kids. Because most cases that come into the system in Iceland are between teenagers. So we're talking about both it's not a grown-up, a perpetrator. So we are also talking, we need to educate children and teenagers about healthy sexuality so we can stop them from becoming grown-up perpetrators or offenders. So education is the most important. And so when we can get the good education to them, we need to start educating adults first, but kids wants to be listened to. Age appropriate and developmental appropriate discussion about healthy sexuality also. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Very important points. We have a question for Nikishka as well. And then we'll move on to the more overall questions that we have. So Nikishka, the question leads a very important point that you make about the difficulty and vulnerability of girls when a family member is the perpetrator. What measures can you take in such a situation without putting the girl in danger?
Right. I was sharing a story about a girl. I deliberately didn't finish the story, but I deliberately didn't give it an ending. And the reason is that I knew something is a question like this will come up. Now, when we have situations like that, first of all, is to get the official consent of the girl. And if the girl gives the consent like the girl in the story, the next thing we do is that we put together, we'll make it obvious, we make it clear to her what she should expect from the journey. And one of the things that will make it clear also is that there is every possibility that you might be needing another shelter. You might be moving from this shelter because this shelter is no longer safe to a better shelter. And that is where we have partnerships in our work. We partner with organizations that are into shelter and organizations that offer home services for girls and women that are into that has these issues. So when such thing happen, we move them to this shelter and then start giving them the psychosocial support that is needed, or the counseling that is needed, everything, the education and all of that. From there, they grow. As I speak to you now, this girl is currently in university in one of these universities in Nigeria. She is in school. She's doing very well, and she is more gender. She's a gender advocate more than I am. I normally tell her to be coming down. So, but experiences are one of the things that pushes people to talk. So, what we do first of all is to, in fact, let me share another issue. There is a scenario where we got a call in Project Safe, where a young girl actually was in danger. She was trying to speak about how the father molests her, and what she said is, when the GBV case officer asked her, what can you talk? Can you leave? Do you think you can leave the place now? She said, if I step out of this place, my father will kill me. So there is always that danger to their life. And so the first thing we do is we start with counseling them, giving them reasons why they should leave, giving them what life is if they are not under being violated or that. So we try to, there is no, how do I put it? You don't just move in and just pick the girl and run. The man might sue you for kidnap. You might be sued for kidnap and he will win because there is no consent. So what you do is gradually make them understand, make them give their consent, make everything, the process is as transparent as it should be. And every part of the way, make them understand that everything that they're doing or they're doing with you is highly confidential. That also gives them some level of confidence and trust in what they're doing, and it helps them to move. So without putting them in danger, the first thing we do is to ensure that they are in tandem, they are in line with what we are doing, and they are ready to work with us. And once a victim is ready to work with you, you will get to the end of that particular process. The only thing is that we have certain challenges. For example, in West Africa or Nigeria, for instance, the institutions they kind of jeopardize our work. They kind of make it even very hard because you might get to the point of getting the perpetrator, putting the person behind bars, and then he just a little bribe, and then they'll set the perpetrator is on the streets again. Just a little bribe to the police, or the case might not even go to court. And sometimes the cost of taking them to court makes it almost impossible for some of these victims to get justice. And so it becomes a vicious cycle where you manage to get a victim to consent, the victim consents, the perpetrator gets caught, he puts him to the prison or jail, and then goes to court. Just like that, they can't go to court because they can't afford to go to court, and it keeps going because we don't have strong institutions that will cushion all of this. So at the end of the day, is working with them, making sure that they're in line with what you're doing, being transparent, and ensuring that at the end of the day, the victim is well taken care of. Thank you very much. Because at the end of the day, it's just the victim. Everything is about the victim. We are using a survival-based approach. It's the survivor first before any other thing. So that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And you're tapping into something here that I think we'll finish with. I'd just like to share a comment that has been posted in the question and answer box. It says that gender-based violence should be given a multi-sectoral approach where services are given under one roof. This is the only way justice and timely service can be provided. And Sarah, who's posted comments, continues to ask if it's possible to reduce the number of interview sessions a survivor undergoes without repeating the same thing that emotionally drains the survivor. And I think I'll leave that question open for you all, but instead for our final just question around the table, looking forward and what we want to do. And I'll start with you, Anna, so you can highlight both of the questions. I see your hand is raised, but just as well to highlight the two last questions in one. There's a question asking how best are you going to empower the listeners to reach out to local communities? And I thought we could join this with, about you sharing your experiences on addressing the politicians to support and change the attitudes about sexual abuse of children and also gender-based violence, so that we can finish with some tools that we can use in going forward after this session. But Anna, I'll ask you to go first, and I can restate the question again if it was a bit too long.
Thank you, Regina. Yes, it's true that we need a multi-pronged approach that involves many stakeholders. I've seen a good practice with Rwanda, where the government has put in place a one-stop GBV center, where you have the social workers, the police, the legal department, you have the prosecutors, you even have a resident judge within the same facility, and everything is handled within one particular facility. However, I think the only problem with that is that sometimes when things are being run by the state, there's an issue of trust that comes with the community, in terms of not politicizing, but also it's good when you have a one-stop center because it shows commitment, but it also ensures the survivors that they will get all the support they need in one place. But of course, it will also support them to not be interviewed several times. I think I also saw a very good practice in Texas with the Vital Voices program that I'm part of. They have a very good GBV one-stop center. It's a triage model where they also have a resident judge, but the interview is done once and recorded once by a trained interviewer in all aspects, you know, social, economic, legal, psychological. That person brings up all the questions within one interview room. And of course, then the other service providers will just rely on that one interview to support. And if they need more information, they can always tap into this person to go back and ask that particular, have that interview ask that particular question. So I think, yes, it's very good for us to have a one-stop center, but we have to keep in mind that it has to be neutral and not to be politicized, but also ensure that the survivors feel trust. They trust that facility and are able to get the services they need, and that there's enough resources within this facility to even support the investigations. Yes, thank you. Back to you, Regina.
Thank you, Anna. And do you have any comments on how we can best empower the listeners moving forward on this topic?
Yes, I think the best empowerment that we can get is knowledge. Knowledge is power. The more we educate ourselves, the more we are aware about the issue, the more we'll be better at handling it. But also the fact that we need to look out for those good practices that we can adopt within different countries. Like I talked about the Rwanda One-Stop Center. It's a really good facility. It has very good practices. All the trainings are done in a professional way for all the service providers. So it's very easy for somebody to get services there. But also we need to think about committing our key stakeholders within our government officials or our countries to be able to, you know, address issues of gender-based violence, but not also leaving out the boys, because we have more focus on the women and the girls. We need to also start thinking about how do we handle the boys? How do we get them to speak up? How do we listen to them? What services do we design, or what particular interventions would work best for the boys as well? And of course, invest a lot in research as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. Who else would like to share on this final question? Perhaps, yes, Sigrid.
Thank you. Regarding the one-step center, we do have that in Iceland. It's called Children's House, and it's run by the government, but it's part of the system in Iceland. So in Children's House, they are trained investigators for like forensic interviewing to investigate and start their case there. So, and it's taped so that the child doesn't have to go on again and again into some kind of interview process to get help. So, and we see this Children's House is being copied all over the world now from the Children's House in Iceland, which is started in the US. How are we going to do some changes? Again, we need to raise awareness. Again, raise public awareness, you know, speak up about the problem. And so the public also understands the scope of the problem. We see so many people coming out and talking about it when they know there's something to talk about, or they are allowed to talk about the problem. And again, we need to ensure that the right of the child is important. You know, every child has the right to be brought up in a healthy environment. And we as a society, we need to step up again and again to make sure that the child is getting everything that their needs met. Regarding politicians, to meet them and talk to them about in one-on-one, giving them both sides of the stories, you know, what is happening when we do prevention. Every time we go speak to teenagers, at least one child speaks up and gets help. So we see this is happening when we talk about it. And when we get those information like research and data about the scope of the problem to people who really, who are in the government, they are starting to listen to us, because either we see the health community, the health society is not gonna, we see many more people coming and speaking up about their problems and trauma now than before. And it's all about because they've been they were not held 20, 30, 40, or 50 years ago. So we can see the change is happening, but it could be happening faster if we raise awareness. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Sara or Nikishka, would you like to add something to this? Nikishka?
Yeah, I would love to finally put before I drop off that we really need to look at leveraging technology. A situation whereby victims can seek for help from the comfort of their homes and also get help from in the comfort of their homes. Because one thing that I know technology does is it gives you that sense of privacy and anonymity. And that is one of the things, and confidentiality also. And that is one of the things that GBV standard operating procedures preach. And so we should look really, practitioners, people in the field, myself, everyone else should look at it, leveraging technology, and also ensuring that we leverage the media. I'll keep talking about the media because I've seen the power of the media recently. We leverage the media, not just printing flyers and doing banners. No, what I mean is heavy television presence, heavy TV presence, radio, everywhere that the media is. We should leverage the media, keep saying this thing. Keep showcasing the impact, just like COVID-19. If we don't do this, look at the repercussions, look at how it's going to harm the society. When we leverage the media, I think we'll get the message across and the importance of the message that we are talking about. And also strong institutions, ensure that we strengthen our institutions, we advocate for better institutions through the policymakers, lawmakers, and all that. It's not easy, but it's doable. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And thank you again to everyone who's been here today. I'll finish off now. We've gone a little bit over time, but I just couldn't bring myself to end the discussions earlier, but I will do so now. And just wanted to thank all of our fantastic panelists for taking the time to be here with us today and sharing your incredible expertise and giving us some really hand-on tools and what we can do moving forward. And thank you as well for all of the attendees for being with us today. And I hope to see you all in 2 weeks' time at our last and final webinar in the series, which will be on marijuana prevention. So I hope to see you all in 2 weeks, and we will be sending out a small report and the recording of this video later on as well. And I hope to see you all again. But thank you so much for being here with us today. And I see Colton's clapping, and I hope everyone... I'm going to do this so we can see one another. Thank you so much. Take care, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Regina. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.